Even seasoned negotiators are prone to making mistakes in negotiation. Some of the mistakes negotiators tend to make: the first one, neglecting the other party's problem. We tend to be immersed in our own problems. Therefore, we tend not to empathize with the other person. Always remember, the main purpose of any negotiation is to get the other party to agree to your proposal. In other words, we want the other party to say yes to your proposal. But the other party will always say yes, not to your own reasons, but to their own reasons. Before you try and change the other party's mind, make sure what goes on in the other party's mind. Try and understand. Empathy is the key word. Do not look at things or the issues from your own perspective. Try and see the issue or the problem from the other person's point of view. Consider the dispute over the construction of a dam. Three key players were involved in this dispute. The utility company, which wanted to construct a dam because it needed extra capacity to produce energy, because there was demand for more energy. The second player in this dispute was the farmers. The farmers feared that building a dam would reduce the water flow affecting their crops. And the third player in this dispute is an environmental group. The environmentalists were worried that construction of a dam would endanger the whooping crane species. These three parties never reached an agreement. They negotiated and they took the matter to the court. They spent a lot of money. They never reached a consensus. Eventually, they decided to park all their differences aside, get to the negotiating table, and adopt an integrative approach, not the distributive approach, which didn't work. Like magic, they found solutions which they couldn't find earlier. The utility company built a smaller dam, which helped the company in generating extra energy to meet the demands. The environmental group got protection from the local authorities as well as from the energy company that its habitat would not be destroyed. The farmers received assurance and guarantee from the utility company that water flow would not be reduced, that they would receive a continuous supply of water. The environmentalists finally even managed to create a trust fund to enhance the whooping crane population elsewhere. Now, what we must look at is that these solutions were already inherent. These solutions were already there. Why did they not look at these solutions? It's therefore important to look at the other party's problem and try and help. As the saying goes, where there's a will, there's a way. The second mistake that negotiators tend to make is focusing on a single factor, thereby ending up bulldozing other interests. We tend to adopt hard bargaining tactics, and when we do that, joint benefits become unrealized. In most negotiations, price becomes the most important factor. But let me tell you, price is not the only one. It's not the only factor. There are non-price factors as well, which may be important. know the rule of emotionomics. Many negotiations place greater emphasis on the economic aspect of negotiation. But emotions also play a key part in negotiations. Consider a simplified negotiation example. This experiment has been conducted several times over. Let's say person A is given $100 to share or to divide with person B as person A likes. Person B can agree or disagree to the arrangement. If person B agrees, the money will be divided according to person A's wish, which is person A will keep $99 and person B would end up with $1. If person B disagrees to the arrangement, neither party gets anything. Interestingly, in a majority of experiments conducted, person B always rejected the offer. But pure price logic would tell us that if you are benefiting, you should go for the arrangement and accept the offer, because £1 is better than having nothing. But people tend to be offended because people see this as extremely unfair, dishonest, against any ethical principle. Therefore, they tend to reject the offer. Why should, after all, one person manages to keep $99 and another person just $1? This captures the idea that on most occasions, on certain occasions, even though we may benefit, if we see that a negotiation, that the terms are unfair, we tend to reject the offer. Successful negotiators, even while they are realistic about the monetary aspects or the economic aspects of negotiation, they are also aware of non-price or the emotional aspect of negotiation. There are three key factors to remember here. Always think about, number one, the social contract. I'm not talking about, in a philosophical sense, Rousseau's social contract, but I'm talking about people. They would like to be valued, they would like to make decisions on their own without being forced to make any decision. It's not the economic contract that matters all the time. Let me give you an example. You might have heard about two large steel companies, Mittal Steel and Arcelor. Mittal Steel, one of the largest steel companies, made a bid to take over ArcelorMittal, the European company. Arcelor, the European steel company, did not like the way Mittal Steel approached with the offer. It rejected it. Mittal Steel went on to make a hostile bid. Arcelor still rejected. It did everything that it could possibly do in order to prevent Mittal Steel from taking Arcelor over. Eventually, both companies merged, but not without a lot of drama and behind-the-scene negotiations. But what made the merger between these two companies possible? It's not just the money, but several non-price factors. The merger became possible only when Mittal put in some enormous amount of efforts in convincing Arcelor about how both companies' philosophies, values, principles, and ethics matched, how complementary they were, not polarized or opposed. Until that happened, Arcelor was reluctant and even thinking about merging with a non-European company. The second factor is process. Process is as much important as the content. Let me give you an example from my own experience. In one of my classes, two students wanted to become the class rep. Only one could possibly become the class rep. They started canvassing with their classmates, seeking votes. One student, through one of his classmates, came to realize that one of his friends, best friends, was not thinking of voting for him. He was taken aback, a bit upset. He approached his friend and asked her why she was not going to vote for him. He asked her a series of questions. Am I not your friend? She said, yes, you are my friend. Have I not been nice to you? You've been very nice. Did I not buy you coffee the other day? Yes, you did. Have I not helped you with your assignments? You have helped me with my assignments. Then why did you tell this person that you're not going to vote for me? She said, you didn't ask. Now that captures the idea that sometimes when it comes to negotiation, we make assumptions about the other party. Process is very important. People want to be respected. People expect the entire negotiation process to be personal, to be fair, to be straightforward, that the other party should be involved, not just making an assumption that the other party would blindly support you or accept your offer. The third factor is stakeholder consideration. Know who the stakeholders are. Stakeholders are those people who can affect and be affected by any decision that you make. There are stakeholders who can be quite obvious, and there are also stakeholders who may not be so obvious but still can scupper the decision that you make. Glaxo and SmithKline Beecham, two pharmaceutical giants, they announced a possible merger. They sorted out some of the key issues as to who would occupy the top management positions. The moment the merger was announced, the combined value of both these companies shot up to $20 billion. Unfortunately, soon after they announced the possible merger, they realized that there were differences at the lower level. Both companies had differences of opinion as to who would control the day-to-day operations, day-to-day management of the merged companies. The moment the differences started to surface, the 20 billion market capitalization that the announced merger generated evaporated in no time. Therefore, understand the stakeholders, people who can affect or be affected by whatever decision that is made in any negotiation. The third mistake is what I call positional myopia. Myopia, as you know, short-sightedness, and positional is when you are immersed or deeply ingrained in your own position, you tend to disregard others' positions, you tend to disregard what's happening around you. We tend to feel sometimes powerful because of the position we are in, and we tend to assume that we can achieve what we want by forcing others to accept our decision or our offer. People who are afflicted or affected by positional myopia, they tend not to be quite clear about the issues. They tend to be inflexible in their stance. and their interests are not well known. They do not tend to speak out what their interests are. A very good example is Saddam Hussein when he invaded Kuwait, the first Gulf War. It all happened in no time. In a matter of 6 days, he annexed Kuwait to Iraq, and his audacious foray into Kuwait startled the entire region. The Arab League was shaken. Western countries did not have a clue as to how to deal with this because it was sudden. The Arab League, headed by Hosni Mubarak of Egypt, brought together the Arab leaders. They negotiated, and they came up with a good, attractive package to offer to Saddam Hussein so that he could withdraw from Kuwait. They came up with 3 attractive offers. The first one, Saddam Hussein was given control of Ramallah oil fields, which he claimed the oil field belonged to Iraq. Saddam Hussein was also given control of Bubian Island in the Persian Gulf. The Arab League was also willing to renegotiate the 14 billion war debt Iraq held with Kuwait during the Iran-Iraq war. But Saddam Hussein had 2 options. He could either go for a win-win, which is withdraw the troops from Kuwait, so that everyone would be happy with the outcome. He would still end up with something very attractive, an attractive package. Or his other option, reject the offer made by the Arab League. And that's a win-lose approach, because he wanted to win. He didn't care whether other parties won or lost. And we all know what's happened later. Eventually, Saddam Hussein lost everything. He did not just lose the war, he did not just lose the attractive package that was offered to him, he also lost Kuwait. So these are some of the dangers. Even though this example is extreme, you can understand what can happen if we tend to be rigid in our own position and not understanding the bigger picture. The fourth mistake negotiators tend to make is blinkered vision. One is self-serving bias. What's a self-serving bias? It's again a psychological terminology. When we are affected by self-serving bias, we tend to overestimate the chances of winning while underestimating the possibility of losing. We always think we're going to win. It's like buying a lottery. We buy a lottery because we think we're going to win. We don't buy a lottery thinking we're going to lose, or else we wouldn't be buying any lottery in the first place. And the second factor is selective perception. Selective perception refers to seeing what we want to see or what we want to hear, and we shut out everything else. Microsoft was afflicted both by self-serving bias and selective perception in its negotiation with the European Union. Therefore, it cost Microsoft a huge amount of money, $2.4 billion to be precise. What's happened? Microsoft was accused of indulging in unfair business practices in the web browser market, thereby creating a barrier for smaller companies such as Opera to gain a foothold, to expand in the market. Microsoft was taken to court. Microsoft could have negotiated the problem with its competitors or with the European Union, but it was afflicted by self-serving bias because it overestimated its chance of winning, and it was afflicted with selective perception. It wanted to see what the company wanted to see. The case dragged on for 10 years. In the meantime, European Union kept on slapping fines and penalties on Microsoft, It all amounted to, as I said earlier, $2.4 billion. Only recently, Microsoft gave up the fight. It realized, to its own disadvantage, that it's not going to win the case. Therefore, remember some of the mistakes that we can make in our negotiations.